Greetings, everyone, to TRG 30, the first one in October. I'm so pleased to be with you, TRG 30, where we talk about bold changes for our sector's resilience. And today, we're going to pull up and share what we've learned by diving in to those 7 ways, those 7 bold ways that I just mentioned, that this summer I suggested we need to change in the way that we think so that we are more resilient. At the end of that session this summer, I asked you, are you motivated to talk further, explore these issues with me and others, engage on these 7 ways? And boy, a lot of you did. So over 5 sessions in late August and through September, we hosted about 100 arts leaders across the globe in deep conversation about governance, business models, the role of artists at the center of our organizations, mission statements, so much more. The conversations were robust. Sometimes they were hard. They were inspiring and thought-provoking. And today, you're going to hear from the moderator of those discussions, Christopher K. Morgan, and from our first TRG listening panelist, Ben Cameron. Our listening panel is key to us at TRG. They're helping us listen to understand where there might be biases or gaps in our questions or thinking, where we missed the point or need to explore further our questions with the field, and where we might, as a sector, need to learn, lean in, think differently. As always, before I begin and introduce our guests, here's what I want you to be listening for. First, am I normal? Do these observations that you're going to hear Ben and Christopher and I talk about differ from the truth in your organization? Gut check. Second, pull up. Today, pull up to 20,000 or 35,000 feet, the closest I've been to plane horizons in a while. As you think about your organization at that level, does it compel you to think about your own flight plan, so to speak, and how you might need to change it? And finally, always action. Action. Prioritizing time. I know, because we're talking to you all the time. You are focused on closing out this year. You're focused on the beginning of next year, but we really must now start thinking future with a capital F, and consider what questions you might need to ask that might be different than the ones you're asking today. Who needs to answer them as you think about your flight plans? Okay, so let's get to our 2 guests today, whom you'll see as I introduce them. First, Ben Cameron. He likely needs no introduction to most of you. His panoply of professional experiences made him a perfect fit for and to be a member of our listening panel. And it's why, coupled with, if you know him, his fierce intelligence and charm, he's called on to speak and inspire and consult to our sector. His work spans foundations like the Jerome Foundation, where he is in the Twin Cities now, and also 10 years almost at the Doris Duke Foundation. He was program director for the arts during the Great Recession and beyond. His experience includes the corporate sector, where he led community relations for Target stores and their foundation activities in the arts, service organizations like TCG, Theater Communications Group, where he was the executive director, and Ben, you've worked in government too at the NEA, where you directed the theater program. You started as an actor, got your degree from Yale School of Drama. There are honorary degrees, board seats, and I'm always humbled and thrilled to call you my friend. Welcome to you today.
Thank you. Thank you. You want to speak at my funeral? I want you there.
and then there's our extraordinary moderator. And as a result, my new friend and a de facto member, easy for me to say, of our listening panel too, Christopher K. Morgan. Christopher, we met you through a contact at the NEA actually, who said, "Oh, I hear what you need, and there is no one better than this guy. Let me embarrass him and tell you a little bit more about him. Currently, he's the executive artistic director at Dance Place in Washington, D.C., but there's more, so much more. Something that really hit me, Christopher, is that you are a native Hawaiian and you brought deep, profound respect and listening to everyone in our forums, their history, places, and experiences. Christopher's a dancer, a choreographer. He directs the Art Oh My Dance International Collective. He was coaching me on how to say that. Art Oh My Dance Collective, an international collective in New York, which is on the forefront of international collaboration. You founded your own company, Christopher K. Morgan, an artist. In 2011, Dance Magazine cited you as one of our country's breakout dance choreographers. Christopher's a sought-after educator, facilitator, panelists, on faculty, has been at the University of Maryland, American University, and recently you've been on the forefront of national and international discussions on cultural appropriation, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Christopher, welcome to you today. I could not be more pleased to be sharing my screen and this time with both of you as we surface the important conversations that we had. So Benjamin, I just called you Benjamin. Ben,
Yes.
I don't know if your mother called you Benjamin.
Only when I was in trouble.
This conversation is designed to surface while it's fresh. These sector forums ended just a couple of weeks ago. And Christopher, you were there each time, but Ben, you, as a member of our listening panel, not only reviewed the video, but also I wrote my own observations that we will be sharing, but my own observations about what I heard. And your job as a panelist was to help do what I described at the beginning. And I asked you to share some of your top line thoughts as a result of hearing those conversations. Take the mic and do that.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. And I should preface this by saying I join you in your admiration for Christopher because his facilitation was so extraordinary, and I've become a huge fan of all the participants in the groups. When you ask for sort of top-level thinking, I thought there's sort of three things I think I hear beneath the thrum of what's actually been said. Number one is I hear from the participants that they are passionately and deeply and ardently dedicated to the work that they've been asked to do for the last decades. And that ultimately people tend to define them. It's easier for people to see their life's work through what they have done historically. And what that's led me to be aware of is people tended to go from what I call an inside out perspective to say, well, we do plays, how do we get that in the community? We do talkbacks, how do we get that in the community? It was harder for people to take the reverse and to go from outside in, to ask themselves, in the world of today, in the world as we see it changing, what is it in the larger world that exists in abundance to which we can attach ourselves? And how do we bring that into the organization and anchor ourselves in that need, regardless of what we've done in the past? Just a harder question. Second question I think I heard similarly was, because we love what we do, our natural lens for focus tends to be on what I call the product, for lack of a better word, the performance, the talkback, the exhibition. And it was a harder stretch for people to orient themselves toward the social capital. What's the impact of the work? How do we foster conversations, not of us talking to the audience, but what it means for the audience to talk to one another? And certainly we know that it's the social capital that people value most highly about the arts, the way the arts connect us to other people. And third and finally, I would say, I hear people are so pressed for time and that people feel so overburdened and there is just so much to do. And it's harder for us to ask ourselves in this moment, what is it we're going to give up and stop doing so that we can give the necessary time, energy, and resources to the most urgent tasks we're now called to do? A question that is especially, I think, compounded because people tend to tackle problems still within my organization is going to do this. This is what I do. And less discussion about this is what my local ecosystem of arts organizations is taking on collectively, which then compounds the burden on each individual organization to be doing it alone.
Okay, so outside in, the value of social capital, this issue of time, its use. Christopher, react to that.
I came away with such a profound appreciation and admiration for everyone engaging in this work in this really difficult time. And I felt a really strong theme that there was an awareness of how our deepest vulnerabilities have been so exposed by the multiple pandemics we're in right now. And then I felt like there was a spectrum or a range of where that awareness was meeting openness to change. And it's very understandable. There's so much that we are responding to right now. So some folks in the sessions felt really ready and on the precipice of change, engaged with their boards, holding community conversations, and ready to deeply and wholeheartedly step into it. And some folks were still opening themselves up to that possibility. And I think that left me, this really resonates with what Ben was just saying. It left me with this idea of how do we disentangle ourselves from our attachment? I think this time is requiring us to all take that 20,000 foot perspective that you just invited us to do, Jill. When I zoom out of my micro part of this ecosystem, when I zoom out and see the whole ecosystem, where does this fit in? And can I disentangle from that enough to open myself to new possibilities? And I think some folks were really ready, but some folks only were just beginning to scratch the surface of it. And as a fellow executive artistic director, I feel that sometimes my staff, who's very, very adamant about change, I resist them sometimes, and I'm always trying to zoom out. So I really empathize with that, but I think that's where we're really called to take action now. Open ourselves up.
It struck me, this dual role that you played as a facilitator and a leader of an organization. It gave you a really distinct view into the challenges here. I will say to both of you, boy, do the things that you're describing resonate as I look across the sector. And yet we did hear examples. I mean, like a half a dozen of them as I was approaching this conversation with you came to mind of leaders who were courageously creating change in the way their governance is structured, in the way that they are connecting with their community. There's a leader who's created a community organizer position to do the listening on behalf of an organization. What inspired you, like on taking the positive tack, what inspired you about what you heard as you listened to these sessions?
Christopher, I'll yield to you first on this one.
I think something that really inspired me was a handful of institutions that were pivoting from their predominantly touring model of bringing in big name companies, orchestras, etc., to engaging with their local arts community in deeper or expanded ways, and that was starting to provoke new thinking about who they were serving. That was really inspiring, and then that was in tandem with a few folks that were really convening listening circles of various kinds in ways that seemed new and a result of the past 7 months of challenges that we've been facing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was one listening circle in particular that I responded to where the leader said, you know, we're assembling these people not to talk to them about what our theater means to them. We just want to understand what's real in their lives and what they're urgent. We're not even talking about our theater. We're trying to embrace the community. I think I was multiply inspired by the passion of the leaders, as I've said before, the fact that I'm watching a generational shift. So many people now want to come into the field. And I think I'm always inspired because I know that the fields have changed and adapted to times. I think for me, the question is, it's around intentionality. And I hope there are some groups that want to resume what they were doing, and we need them to resume. And there's some groups that want to refocus and reimagine what they're doing, and we need them as well. For me, it's about clarity and intentionality whichever of those decisions you're pursuing, that I find really inspiring.
The issue of time, it came up in virtually every session. And it was a weird conversation in that it was multidimensional. On one hand, I have less time if I'm an executive leader or staff member because there are fewer of us together right now. And I feel pressured. On the other hand, I have a different kind of time right now. And there's an ellipsis at the end of that sentence. For both of you, what did you hear? What were your takeaway about how we're thinking about and treating time?
I think this is a perfect opportunity to disentangle the word I used a little while ago. Our attachments to time, to planning seasons and calendars and engagements and events and booking flights, so much of that has created a machine that we're all so used to. And so if we can separate ourselves from that a little bit more, perhaps there's more opportunities to address the really difficult, deep questions that everyone was grappling with. And to be gracious with ourselves and our staffs, our institutions, and transparent with our stakeholders, whether that's funders or audiences or artists, really transparent. This bending of time is forcing us to interrogate some questions, and so our response time, our way of working is evolving. Will you be gracious with us and evolve with us?
You know, I would say that time, of course, as we all know, is the one inflexible thing. No matter what we do, there's still going to be 24 hours to the day and 7 days a week, and that's going to be it. And so a lot of this really, I think, is the opportunity to say, am I maximizing my time and my team's time so that everyone is focused, connected to their strengths? Because if everyone is focused on tasks of which they're strong, it will lift the organization as a whole as we soar collectively together. I think the scary part is, for many leaders, that means relinquishing some degree of control and being increasingly adaptable to discomfort and vulnerability than in the past. But I do think that that's the fundamental task, is about maximizing collective strength for the benefit of everyone.
As I look at the clock and know that Stephen's going to be joining us soon here, I've got a question. I'm going to answer it first of both of you. Christopher, we'll start with you. The question is, of the 7 sessions, we talked about, are our missions good enough anymore? Or are they good enough now for this time? Business model needs to change. Artists should be at the center. Diversity should be fuel. Listening to our communities and audiences, governance models, and the concept is smaller is better than gone. We started there, actually. Smaller is better than gone. The question is, which session captivated your attention the most and why? And mine was really about governance. It's very much on top of my mind. And the reason is because when I ask organizations, staff, executive leaders about their governance, the role that their board plays, and how big of an issue this is, they will say it's not. And then if you unpack it, what you'll learn is it's either a huge opportunity to enliven and engage, or it's a huge pain point. And then when you unpack it, you realize, oh, that's a big thing. It's kind of out here. And my contention is we need to get at it now then so that we can create. That's my answer. Christopher, what's yours? What caught your attention in the conversation the most?
It's hard to pull out one because I think the brilliance of the 7 ways is they link together really strongly. But connected to what you said, the one on mission really strikes me. And I think it's because we spent a lot of time talking about the accuracy of our missions. Does it represent what we're doing? And I think what we could have been doing, and maybe this was some of the prompts and questions that I offered and how the meeting was facilitated, but what we could have maybe dug a little deeper into, and we can do now and on our own, is, does it have relevance? Do our missions have relevance? Not necessarily accurately represent what we do, but are they relevant to our communities?
Do I get to have half of each of your answers? Because you two grabbed the two sessions that meant the most to me. And Jill, as you know, because I've talked to you, I'm actually less attuned to mission than I am to values, and that's a whole other discussion. I do think personally, as I watch the field, I think the difference between organizations who are going to make it and those who aren't is largely going to be due to the quality of the governance of those organizations in addition to the leadership. And what struck me in that session in particular is that often we haven't really grappled with what the distinction between management and governance is, and that we are still trying to think of board recruitment as who do we get to solve the problem we have today, as opposed to taking the longer view and saying, if this is what we want to be in 10 years, who are the people that we can assemble to call that into being, so when their board terms are over in a decade, they will have made possible where we're trying to get.
Yeah. Okay, so Stephen's going to have questions. As we go there, this is 20,000 feet, and next steps as an organization that you can be taking that might fuel some of the Q&A that's coming are these questions. Are you asking questions that relate to these 7 or others? What are the right questions? Who's asking them? We had a facilitator. I would recommend Christopher. There's such a gift in having someone ask the questions and help you challenge whether you need to change them. Time, you're likely focused on the now, that's okay, but looking forward is going to require, especially executive leaders, to carve out time for creative thinking. And as you do that, you're going to realize you're going to have to stop doing some things and reprioritize other things so that you can align your team and take the right kind of action. Boy, Stephen, steal the mic here and help us.
Well, sure. Thanks to those submitting questions. Q&A button if you haven't already. A first question around the distangling of our attachments, Christopher, that you mentioned. It seems distangling from our attachments requires us to subordinate our egos. Egos sometimes help drive our field or our creative visions. How have you both seen a positive way to manage that particular conflict?
I'll try and think of a specific example, but there's a model that I like to think about. I find a lot of folks enter collaborations, and I think we need a lot of collaboration right now in order to sustain our field. A lot of folks think of circles in collaboration. I like to think of collaboration as a cyclone because there's movement and energy in that, and in that spinning action, you can tell I'm a dancer, that spinning action creates movement that pushes something up. So that's when an ego or an individual can rise, and all things need leaders. We always need strong, ethical, moral leadership. So the energy pushes someone up. But to me, a strong collaboration and opportunity for strength and resilience happens when then that energy pulls that person or that leader back down, and it creates the space for someone else to rise. So I'll try and think of specific examples, but that model is something that I find is a really important guiding principle for me.
I would just add that where I've seen organizations fall into disarray at these kind of moments, it's often because there's deep understanding of the mission and no understanding of the commonly held core values that the organization exists to serve. And that what I found in this moment is that if you can attach what's going on to your basic core values and recognize that part of humility means you see yourself in service to a bigger tradition or a bigger community, that can re-anchor the conversation in a way that lets people surrender.
A question around our teams. How do we figure out our team's individual strengths? And then how do we reconfigure optimally our staffing and tasks accordingly?
I actually would step and take it from the other end for a minute just to say, what are the collective strengths the team needs to accomplish? And what that may mean is some of the people we currently have in the team can help us get there. What are the additional strengths? How do we neutralize their weaknesses and attract additional talent to join them so that the team can move somewhere? And what this may mean is people that are already there may have to take on things they're not used to doing, and they may have to give up some things that they love doing as you are hiring new people. But if you said, for example, that the shop's job is no longer to build the set, the shop's job is to build the set and to have deeply authentic relationship with construction people in future builders in the community, that would totally change how you thought about who the team was and what the team's job would be.
I think we've been hearing and reading a lot about this. I think a lot of participants in this TRG 30 today are doing this, assessing different skill sets that have been under the surface and that are needed now. So you just mentioned crew and sort of production teams that, I've been reading things about how some of them are being engaged in writing campaigns, and we didn't, a staff didn't realize there was a gifted writer who was building sets most of the time. So how to assess within the team and share very transparently, we have different needs right now. Is there someone in our team that might be able to fulfill some of that need and see from within what emerges?
Two snip questions, and then thank you to those submitted. A question around how are executive directors listening to individuals that contact them regarding suggestions from the community? I see a lack of engagement with arts leadership with the community they claim to serve or save.
That's a tough one, and I think that comes from fear, and I understand that fear so well. Critical feedback is difficult to manage, to hear, to respond to, and then to implement action. At least that's how I respond myself. I'll speak firsthand. It comes from my own fears a lot of the time. And I think there's nothing more difficult than looking at oneself, one's institution in a mirror and holding a bright light to yourself and saying, yes, there is work we need to do, and to communicate. Communication is everything right now. It is really the only thing that we have is our ability to communicate with one another. So for me, quite personally speaking, it has to do with being self-aware and willing to go into the difficult and communicate about it.
I would only add to that I've personally, in this kind of moment, I have found the value of time and giving myself time to digest before feeling the pressure to respond. And I feel that with my board as well. I mean, any issue, it's a two meeting issue. Let's just talk. Let's go away and digest that. And then let's come back together and speak about what is true for me in the wake of that as a preface to the conversation rather than responding in the instant and trying to speak for others.
And that's so important because there's such a pressure to respond quickly right now. Thank you for that.
Bill, I wonder if you might just quickly answer this one. A provocation to us is, it seems this moment is challenging the mission of the leader of the organization. Whereas maybe the mission of leading previously was about delivering excellent art to our community, now our mission is to answer the question of not just how excellent we are, but also what we need what need our organization addresses in our community. Yeah. It means leaders need help understanding how to lead this way, and how are we addressing this at TRG?
Yeah. Okay, servant leaders. That's a term that we hear, but really, the leadership challenge now is to ask the question: whom are we serving, and how can we best serve them internally and externally? And boy, this is on our minds. Leaders in the creative sector are required to be excellent to help our communities recover. Arts and culture is part of the recovery economy, and we are absolutely thinking about this at TRG. Please stand by for more of that, and know that as I share and move us forward, we will continue to engage your questions, feed them to Christopher, you, and Ben, and make sure they're answered. And our upcoming TRG 30s are designed to help do some of this too. Next week, we're going to go into the corporate world with author Robbie Kelman Baxter and ask her to create a case for subscription and membership for those of us who might feel a little tired by. We believe in, so does she. Dr. Michael Maddouse, resiliency. I know how tired you are. I know how exhausted your staff teams are. He's going to talk about the resiliency bank account with the most compelling personal story, and then we'll have members of our sector putting forward their organizations as examples. As you begin to transition to your next Zoom meeting, know that every TRG 30 moving forward, we're going to have a data corner. And today's data corner comes to us from a recent review of 60 philanthropic campaigns during the pandemic. 90% of those with a match met or exceeded their goal. Only 60% met their goal if they didn't have a matching gift. So a tactical tip for you to take away from TRG 30 today is secure a match now for your calendar or fiscal year end campaign, and know that at TRG we are here developing, listening. I couldn't thank you enough, Ben and Christopher, and I wish we had a whole nother hour. I know some of our participants do too. We're all going to say goodbye now as we transition to the next parts of our day. Your participation in our process and your leadership in our field is a gift. I'm deeply grateful to both of you. Thank you for joining us today. Stephen, always thank you to you.
Bye, everyone.